Hello everyone and welcome back to yet another holiday special. So my Christmas specials have historically been my worst performing videos, and although I considered, not making another horrible Christmas movie review, I've decided to do it just one more time and just clump them all together. A YouTube algorithm Hail Mary, if you will, and then I'm probably not touching this shit ever again. Unless this really pops off, then I don't know, maybe we'll do a worst Hanukkah movies, Kwanzaa, Diwali, we'll see what we can find. This year I did a bit of scouring. I looked across multiple sites like Rotten Tomatoes, IMDb, Reddit, and gathered up some of the worst Christmas movies as rated by audiences and critics. I'm gonna keep all of them a surprise, so you actually stick around and watch this whole thing, but I will say that it would feel wrong to not throw in the previous two holiday special movies, Elves and Santa Claus Conquers the Martians, as contenders on this list. This time giving them legitimate criticisms and reviews, and finally at the end of the video deciding which is the worst Christmas movie out of all of these. Like my Goosebumps video, this is going to be scaled kind of relative to the other movies on this list, prioritizing enjoyability over anything else, meaning that to earn the spot for the worst Christmas movie, you're going to have to get a low enough score and be so extremely infuriating and boring that I would never suggest that anyone watches it. This might be a bit, so sit back, relax, and enjoy some content focusing on a bunch of movies you probably never have and never will have any interest in watching anyways. I hope you all enjoy. This movie truly amazes me. In my mind, I feel like I really like Tim Allen, but Christmas with the Kranks is just so... I don't even know how to describe it. I have lost some degree of respect for the man, I'm gonna be honest. I have a theory that although this movie seems, to be maybe marketed as a kid's movie, it's actually a horror film where Santa, who does show up kind of near the end of the movie, is actually a Lovecraftian entity, punishing Tim Allen and Jamie Lee Curtis for not celebrating Christmas. Everyone in the town of this movie is cultishly obsessed with Christmas, and since the Kranks' daughter, Blair, is leaving for Christmas, her mom, Jamie Lee Curtis, gets very depressed, so Dad, Tim Allen, tries to cheer up his wife with a cruise, leading to all sorts of goofy, uncomfortable, nonsensical shenanigans as the neighborhood systematically destroys the reputation of the Kranks for not celebrating Christmas. The dialogue in this movie from our two leads is just so awkward and unnatural that it sounds like an alien species who doesn't really understand how human language is supposed to work. To the point where the absurdity of this movie leans into almost the uncanny, as the Kranks are continuously tortured with the worst luck imaginable, as the townspeople follow pretty much their every move. Before the Kranks leave on their cruise, the Kranks' daughter Blair calls them again to announce that she's surprisingly coming back for Christmas with her new boyfriend, so the Kranks have to rush to plan a Christmas party so it seems like they weren't going on a cruise. The movie gets very Christmassy around this part as the once cultish town pitches in to help save the Kranks from having a slightly abnormal Christmas with their daughter, almost as if the magic curse has been lifted by Santa Claus and people start acting abruptly normal again. Leading to a happy ending, I guess, where they're narrowly able to throw a party and happily ever after. This movie is just horrible in so many ways. Throughout the entire movie, I kept pausing to see how much time was left because I really wanted to do anything less than pay attention to this. I'm not sure who it was made for. There's too many sexual and adult jokes put in, but it's also just so absurd with its slapstick comedy and nonsensical story that it almost feels like it has to be a kid's movie. I just don't know why this was made. And I understand, this is supposed to be a worst movie list, but I did not expect to dislike something this much already. I can say that it does have a few laughably bad moments that save it from being maybe one of the worst of today, but I don't know. Everyone was right about this. I have no words. I'm going to give this a 0 out of 5 stars. I never want to see this again. Alright, the first classic that we're revisiting today. Santa Claus Conquers the Martians is in fact not about Santa Claus conquering the Martians, but instead is the story of a group of Martians kidnapping Santa and 2 children from Earth after the leader of Mars thinks his kids are watching too much TV, essentially, and wants to bring them the rumored joy of Christmas. Along the way, the chief of Mars, Kimar, is challenged by one of his subordinates, Voldar, as he attempts to destroy Santa because he thinks it will make the Martian people soft, Martian mellows, as he says. Eventually, though, Voldar and his conspirators are beaten in a scene in which they are attacked by Santa with a bunch of toys, and then Santa decides to head back to Earth. But not before appointing the dumb Martian of the movie, Droppo, as the new Martian Santa Claus for sharing his jolly spirit. If you want any more details on the plot, I previously covered this one, but overall, that's just kind of the bare bones overview. I don't find this movie all that particularly bad. I mean, is it good? No. but I will say it's low-budget costumes, old interpretation of space and technology, and cheesy dialogue definitely adds some charm to this one. That being said, I definitely understand the criticisms. The plot doesn't make any sense. Actually, a lot of the stuff in the movie, it doesn't really make any sense, but that kind of comes with like the Christmas movie territory some of the time. The pacing on this movie, I will say, is a bit slow at times, which kind of makes the movie drag in a lot of cases, but the random goofy bullshit that keeps happening kind of prevents me from hating it too much. I'm gonna give this one a 2 stars. I'll be honest, folks, this one wasn't half bad. The plot essentially involves a new nice neighbor guy, Danny DeVito, and grumpy traditionalist Ferris Bueller as they start a feud after Danny DeVito decides he wants his house to be visible from space for some reason, and decides to lather his house in Christmas lights to accomplish this, leading to Ferris Bueller getting annoyed and a long and wacky back and forth to ensue. Now, is this movie cheesy? Yes. Is it incredibly cliche? Yes. Does it feature one too many jokes about the fathers of underage teenage girls accidentally catcalling their own daughters? Also, yes. But those things aside, I think Danny DeVito especially does a pretty good job here playing the quirky next-door neighbor, and Ferris Bueller plays a stuck-up asshole pretty well. That being said, the humor in this movie never really landed for me. It just felt forced a majority of the time, but when it came to the heartfelt and impactful moments like the ending, I think it did relatively well, even if it did end exactly how you'd expect it to. Probably one of the better movies we're going to get here. I'd say it arguably would be an okay movie to just kind of leave on in the background of a Christmas party if you really wanted to. We'll go 3.5 stars. Because we all believe in Santa, there will always be a Santa. Well, whatever that was, it certainly was not good. Considering this movie came out in 2002, it's not really all that surprising that it looks like a geometrical abomination of shapes moving around with terrible, choppy, and in some cases delayed animation. It looks like something I could have made. Even got the Comic Sans font at the beginning to top things off. But then you watch the movie and you start to recognize some voices and you realize this isn't some low-budget thing a kid made, but instead features a star-studded cast of voice actors, which, to be fair, are one of the only good redeeming qualities about this movie. But even these talents cannot save this movie from its horrendous dialogue, as much of it feels absurdly unnatural, which is even better because it's not attempting to be funny. And this kind of parallels the story here, which is almost entirely non-existent. It's absurdly unnatural, and it features some kid who likes to rap all the time as he gives his asshole crush at school a teddy bear that he got from his dead mother. His crush responds by being an asshole, throwing it away, but thankfully, due to the rap kid dropping a letter to Santa in the snow that she coincidentally finds, she's able to learn that his mom died and gave this bear to him, so it causes her asshole girl character to go on a very quick and abrupt journey of self-reflection filled with atrocious songs and a random fever dream of events until they become friends through the magic of Christmas. Things just do not make sense. The dialogue does not make sense. The characters here are hardly characters, but instead are kind of just vessels used to expel very well voice-acted dialogue. This movie feels like the progenitor of really uncanny AI videos, and I think that's kind of what makes it enjoyable in some sense. Now, would I watch this again? No. But is it an enjoyable experience? Also no. But it is kind of funny with cult classic lines such as Grandma's, "You just got it." It's just kind of like brain rot or YouTube poop for like 40 minutes. It's incomprehensible nonsense that's mildly enjoyable only because of how laughably bad it is. 1 star. Alright, ladies and gents, we got an old one. The oldest on this list, actually. This version of Santa, instead of elves, uses child laborers, and so the first whole 10 minutes of this movie is spent going from group to group of kids from each region around the world as they sing a little song in their own languages. After this, the plot further builds out Santa as we are introduced to the villain of the story, which is the devil. A lot of the story is spent jumping from the devil, who's trying to mess with Santa, back to Santa, and then back to some random kid where we learn more about their life story. Rinse, repeat until the night of Christmas Eve, where the devil continues to mess with Santa until he's able to deliver all the presents despite the meddling from the devil, and the end. Although it's very cool to see movies from this era as things were so just different back then, this is really the only positive, as this movie barely deserves to be classified as a movie, I'd say. The long music scene at the beginning is just not needed at all. The story is almost non-existent. The dialogue is pretty horrendous, but I can't hate too much as this movie was originally from Mexico, so it was dubbed in English, but yeah, I don't know. I don't have too many good things to say about the film, but I think for a kid, it could be maybe interesting enough to watch. It's got at least some decent music, some narration that could be engaging for a kid, even if it is really kind of unnecessary for anyone over the age of 6, as well as some semblance of a story, which is more than we can say for some of the movies on this list. Overall, though, yeah, it's very boring. It's not good. But it has elements that kind of make it endearing and nostalgic with its presentation, but that definitely isn't enough for it to be worth watching. So I'm going to give this a 1 star. All right. I hate to admit it, but I actually semi-enjoyed this one. It seems like in the reviews, people either loved or hated it, but here we go. This movie features Ben Affleck as a rich marketing guy who fucks up his relationship and in a desperate attempt to avoid being alone on Christmas, goes to his childhood home and essentially asks the family living there to pretend to be his family for Christmas for 250 G's, plus a little bit extra, which, you know, I think I'd take that offer. The plot plays out pretty much exactly how you'd expect. James Gandolfini just essentially plays Tony Soprano again. Same accent and stuff, which, no complaints here. Probably one of the saving graces of this film. Also, Home Alone mom plays Home Alone mom, Christina Applegate.
Yeah, let's give a quick shout out to Christina Applegate.
Who plays the hot girl who falls in love with Ben Affleck somehow, and after a while of very tense and awkward scenarios with an incestuous overtone, everything works out, and they actually end up becoming a family for real, kind of. One of the biggest issues with this movie is definitely Ben Affleck, who plays like a fucking weirdo throughout the entire first half of this film until he randomly decides to take his normal pills and act like a human being. But other than that, I'd say the main complaint is that the entire love subplot happens in like 2 seconds. It's very rushed and poorly written. Also, the entire personality of like the teenage kid brother in this film is just that he's addicted to porn. Weird choice. Overall, I feel like, especially near the end though, it hits the right notes for it to be a somewhat decent holiday experience. This one isn't good, I'd say, but it's serviceable. I'm gonna go 3.5 stars here. I was a huge fan of Pink Panther growing up. You know, the movie more so than the cartoon, but I did catch an episode on Boomerang every now and then back in the day. Point is, I'm a fan of Steve Martin, so I had high hopes, and this movie was weird. To be fair, review-wise, this isn't one of the worst ones on this list. It seems to be especially loved or hated by a lot of people reviewing it, but for me, it's just kind of okay. I like aspects of it, but it's something. The basic premise is that Steve Martin leads an underfunded suicide prevention hotline, and as the Christmas season approaches, he receives an eviction notice that he attempts to hide from his employees. As the night goes on, though, this building filled with other wacky notable tenants like the obnoxious version of Adam Sandler, a violent and toxic couple, and although not an actual tenant, a trans woman, all somehow get involved in Steve Martin's suicide agency office. And as things get increasingly out of hand, drama about the prevention hotline boils over, people get angry, people get hurt, somebody fucking dies. It's essentially a random sequence of events where something bad or extremely awkward happens to people over and over again until it doesn't, and then we get a nice heartwarming ending. The cast of characters all start off as fairly unlikable people, all deeply flawed in some way, but over the course of the film, they don't really grow, but instead either become tolerated better by the people around them, or magically have a shift in personality because of the Christmas season, or maybe it's just like a trauma bond. That being said, I think the characters here all feel mostly genuine, like real people, and are compelling in their own ways. Besides Adam Sandler, who feels extremely out of place in this. Although its goal is to be a comedy, I didn't find this movie particularly funny or anything, but because it does have a lot of really crazy shit going on happening in what could be only described as a fairly loose plot, I'd say it at least kept me fairly engaged. I don't know. I'm not sure if I'd watch this again. I can understand why someone might like it, but I can also understand how someone might really hate this one as well. I'm gonna go 3.5 stars on this one. I very much struggled with how to rank this film, because although it does seem to have a plot, the plot, like a lot of these, makes absolutely no sense. It essentially revolves around the father of our main kid, the kid that does karate, going missing a year prior on Christmas, and is presumed dead after a clown apparently shot him in a movie theater. The mom of the karate kid assumes that he's dead, but because of some random dream he had, the karate kid assumes his father is actually alive. The mother and son somehow end up stumbling upon this teacher who is apparently also a psychic, and then the rest of this movie is spent with the psychic lady or the karate kid having visions of the father as the karate kid trains to become a black belt and complete a list of 12 objectives that he dreamed will bring his father back to life, while the psychic lady and the mom team up to find the mom's husband. After an hour or so of random visions for a B-plot that, spoiler alert, is almost entirely useless and unresolved, the karate kid ends up getting a black belt by breaking a board in front of his mom in the living room, causing his dad to magically walk in through the patio door, and that's the movie, I guess. This movie on paper seems like it could at least be like fun bad, as some of the other movies on this list are, and although we do get like a very few dumb moments that the audience might get a laugh at the absurdity of, most of this movie is just a boring slog of unimportant information and bad acting propped up by a terribly written script. I can't say that I hated this movie entirely. There are a few moments that are just so dumb, so absurd, that I couldn't help at least laughing a bit at, but it's not something I'd really recommend watching. It's just too uninteresting. I'm gonna give this one a 1.5 stars.
Have yourself a merry little Christmas.
Wow, that was boring. With such a star-studded cast, you'd expect at least a bit of a better movie, but this just flops, mainly because the writing is pretty terrible. Essentially, the entire story here focuses on Joel McHale, the guy from Community whose wife is the Gilmore Girl, as they spend Christmas time with Joel McHale's dad, Robin Williams, because his brother, the guy from Hot Tub Time Machine, is having the baby his ex-girlfriend had while cheated on him baptized on Christmas and wants Joel McHale to be the godfather. It's a bit confusing, I know. Joel McHale and his family are forced to stay with Robin Williams, who plays a deadbeat dad, causing the guy from Community and Aladdin Genie to butt heads the entire time because Aladdin Genie was a bad father. And then their relationship ends up improving as they're forced to drive back to Community Guy's house because he forgot his kid's Christmas present there, and once they drive back, things end up, well, happily ever after. On paper, I feel like this movie could work, but it's just really painfully unfunny outside of this one scene.
Can you tell him that his family can stay? I just need Douglas's gifts.
Well, I can sure as shoot try. Let's see. Hushar, ma shomara, shikanja meton.
Otherwise, a whole lot of jokes that really didn't land for me from characters that don't really feel like they're real people and are instead just kind of weird caricatures of a person that failed to be entertaining in any meaningful way. Is this movie horrible? Yeah, I'd say so. It's a pretty poor excuse for a Christmas film, definitely not something I think kids would enjoy either, and is essentially the tried and true dysfunctional family Christmas trope that we've seen done infinitely better before. It, however, does have an actual semblance of a narrative, which is more than I can say for some of the movies on this list, so I'm gonna give this 2.5 stars. I don't even know what to call that. That wasn't a movie, that was like a loosely constructed YouTube video essay. This movie essentially features this guy who is apparently Kirk Cameron, I guess is his name, which whoever the fuck that guy is, he just drones on to us on and on about why Christmas is the way it is and about having a beautiful Christmas and blah, blah, blah. It's 80 fucking minutes of him just talking, followed by a boring skit scene, followed by dialogue that sounds like a podcast, followed by him talking again. Repeat until there's a Santa Claus dubstep fight scene and then a dubstep dance sequence that lasts for 3 whole fucking minutes. I'm not gonna lie, I just skipped through that part. I'm not watching that entire thing. And honestly, I didn't even really watch a lot of this movie. I was so bored sometimes, I just put my phone down and walked away to do something else because there was nothing for me to visually engage with on the screen more than half the time. Apparently this guy is a pastor and it shows because the entire movie is the equivalent of going to Sunday service and being preached at the entire time. I don't think I've ever watched a movie that's structured like this, and I don't think I ever will again. 0 stars.
It's beginning to look a lot like...
So this is essentially a kids movie featuring everyone's favorite Gummy Bear. From the hit cyberspace anthem Gummy Bear song. So yes, he obviously needed his own children's holiday movie, and here we are. This movie features Gummy Bear and his memorable cast of friends, Cat, Bat, and Chameleon. The friend group find out that Santa is missing and posing an incredible threat on the holiday season, so the gang head to the North Pole to find Santa, only to find out from his Elves that he's actually on Christmas Island on vacation. So they decide to go there instead, where they find out that Santa has actually been kidnapped by an alien as he wants to take him back to his own planet, leading to Gummy Bear and Alien having a dance-off before Alien has a change of heart, I guess, and decides that stealing Santa is wrong. What an incredible movie. And honestly, if this were just a bad kids movie, I really don't think it would be all that hated. A lot of animated kids Christmas movies are bad. You know, what's the big deal? And that right there, that is the big deal. As if the one Gummy Bear song wasn't bad enough, this movie features a good handful of them because, it's the Gummy Bear movie, I guess, obviously. There's really not many good things to say about this movie other than the fact that it might be appealing to babies and toddlers because it has some bright colors, I guess. But anyone outside of this age demographic is gonna have it's a pretty rough time. On the bright side, there may be like 1 or 2 jokes in here that made me kind of exhale out of my nose a little, so that's something. I don't know, I feel like I'm being maybe a bit too harsh on it since it's obviously meant for a younger audience, but I don't know, man. I'm gonna be generous and give this a 1.5 stars.
Joy to the world, the Lord is come.
I'm not even certain how to begin to explain the plot of this movie, but it's another classic that I've previously covered on this channel. We start the movie off with a group of girls who are trying to be edgy and participate in like an anti-Christmas ritual when our main character, Kirsten, in an almost deliberately feeling act of incompetence, cuts her hand open with a piece of glass, spilling her blood onto the ground to awaken the titular Elves, or actually it's just one elf, but they already had that title reserved for Will Ferrell. This causes a series of events to unfold involving Kirsten as she goes home to her cartoonishly evil biological mother and later revealed to be Nazi grandfather, who was also her father, who berate and abuse her as the elves start stalking her, which continues to occur as Kirsten heads to work in their local mall, where she is first introduced to our other main character, the Big Lebowski. Later that night, the Big Lebowski sneaks into the mall to crash after being evicted from his trailer, while Kirsten and her friends sneak in to do inappropriate things with boys. When the two groups are both unfortunately interrupted by Kirsten's grandpa's old Third Reich loving friends, as well as the evil elf, both of which help to murder pretty much everyone besides Kirsten and the Big Lebowski, leading to the two survivors to team up to eventually take down the Nazis and the elf after Kirsten is almost forced to have the elf's baby to usher in the true Aryan half-breed race. Yeah, I don't know. It's a lot of information. I know it doesn't make sense, but that's kind of what this movie is good at. I do like aspects of this movie in some ways for being consistently awful in so many ways without ever managing to be scary like it's attempting to be. The acting here is horrible. The lines of dialogue are also pretty terrible, which doesn't help, as almost no line is delivered without it sounding like it's been read off of a piece of paper. And yeah, the writing is obviously bad as well, with an almost entirely nonsensical plot, but most glaring of all is how intentionally pervert this movie tries to be. Everyone talks about sex. Rape is a key point of the plot. Nazis are in here for some reason, and even with Nazis in the film, the mom of our main character somehow manages to act even more cold-hearted and deranged. It feels like something like a teenager would write if they were told to make a film that was as offensive as possible. I don't know, to be honest, if someone were to come up to me and say this was a 0 out of 10, I would not argue with them at all, but personally, the absurdism kept the film at least mildly engaging, even in the moments when the plot moved at a glacier's pace. This movie is going to get a 1 star, and that's only because it is just laughably bad. Yeah, I actually kind of like this one, kind of. Let me preface this by saying that I've never actually seen the Nutcracker in really any form. I think I maybe went to like the play or musical when I was like 10. But as someone who doesn't really have any nostalgia or expectations going into it, I thought this was fine. Essentially, the plot revolves around this little boy and girl whose uncle is like Albert Einstein, I guess, and he brings over a Nutcracker doll one day when he's visiting to give to the girl, and after a short amount of time, the girl is transported by the Nutcracker, or NC, I guess is what they call him, to another world that is overrun by essentially Nazi rats as they literally burn the bodies of dolls to blot out the sun because the rats are sensitive to light as they work to take over the human population. Not sure if that's how the story normally goes, but yeah. Along the way, musical numbers are sprinkled in. Some of the songs are from the original Nutcracker, which seems to have pissed off a lot of people when I was reading through the reviews. And after enough singing, magic bullshit, the Nutcracker transforming back and forth between a real boy and a puppet, a brief break back to reality scene with a random parent-child drama, and a lot of rat-induced holocausting, the Nutcracker, who is essentially the prince of the toys or something, is able to revolt with the help of the little girl and boy to beat the rat people. And although we think this is the happy ending, the girl is eventually forced to wake up and return to the real world, where she finds that the real human boy version of the Nutcracker is actually like a real dude, and so it was a dream, but maybe not. It's tough to say. It was a weird one, but like I said, I didn't really think it was all that bad. It has a cohesive story and some cool world building, to be honest, but it definitely has some downsides as well. I'm not a big musical guy, so I'm not sure how much my opinion is actually worth here, but I really didn't find the songs to be all that good or memorable. And from what I read, they are essentially just singing over the original tracks from the Nutcracker. Also, it might be a bit too scary for kids, to be honest. The CGI rats can be a bit freaky looking sometimes, and then the obvious, Third Reich parallels might be a lot for them to handle. And I think that kind of relates back to one of the biggest takeaways I had for this movie, and that's that this really doesn't feel like a Christmas movie. I mean, is the Nutcracker associated with Christmas? Yeah. Does it have a big Christmas tree in it for a bit? Yes. But other than that, I really wouldn't say it fits into the standard Christmas movie category. All right, guys, I'm re-recording this. Sorry, I'm kind of sick right now, so I probably sound a little different, but I had a change of heart while I was editing. I think there's a lot to criticize about this movie as I went through it again, and although I think it is kind of elevated by its production value as compared to some of the other things on this list, I still don't think it's like the greatest movie of all time or anything, and I don't know if I'd really recommend watching it, but I think I'm going to give this a 3 stars.
Run, Rudolph. Randolph ain't too far behind.
As someone who likes the original Christmas Story, I was expecting to hate this one a lot more, but it's just kind of mediocre. The squeakquel picks back up a few years after the first one, with everyone now much older, making Ralphie almost 16 as Christmas fast approaches. But after accidentally damaging his dream car from the car dealership, the man who owns the place forces Ralphie to pay him back, leaving Ralphie and his friends in a scramble to get jobs and earn some cash or face the legal repercussions. The movie ends exactly how you'd expect it to, with everything being resolved happily ever after. Now, a lot of the criticism I've seen from this movie is that it just rehashes a lot of the stuff from the first movie, which is unequivocally true. They bring the lamp back in again, the one kid gets his tongue stuck in things again, the narrator is back, which, good choice for that one, honestly. And yeah, definitely feels like a member-berry sort of movie that knows its only chance at appealing to the original fans is to point out things that it copied from it. Compared to the old version, there isn't nearly the charm the first film had. Most of the jokes don't land. Ralphie has one specific kind of creepy moment with our girl in his band class. All of the characters here are shells of their former selves, but this is just when comparing it to the first movie. But this is a sequel, so we can't just ignore that, and as a sequel, it sucks, and does quite literally nothing better than the first movie. But removing it from the lens of the first movie, I'd say it's mildly okay. It has its nice moments. It does have some, never mind. There's not really anything that's all that funny in here to me, but at least I wasn't all that bored watching it. 3 stars. This really doesn't feel like it should belong in the list of worst Christmas movies, if I'm being honest, although I can definitely understand its criticisms. This entire movie is essentially just Arnold Schwarzenegger's hunt for a Turbo Man action figure for his son, a highly sought out toy this holiday season that is seemingly impossible to find anywhere. Arnold's character in this is essentially a work-obsessed, absent father who hasn't really been there for his son or wife, and in a desperate attempt to win back their love and not let his son down, he does increasingly ridiculous things alongside Sinbad as Arnold tries to finally land his hands on a Turbo Man action figure. The movie is very obviously supposed to be a commentary on the absurd consumerism during the Christmas season, which was extremely rampant when this was released in 1996, in an era where people would kill each other over Black Friday deals. The lines from Arnold are kind of hit or miss on the delivery. Certain aspects of the plot are just extremely absurd, especially almost everything surrounding the ending where Arnold is literally just flying around in a jetpack. But honestly, who cares? I think for most people, especially kids, the slapstick humor and absurdity will make it at least an enjoyable enough Christmas movie. 5 stars, probably the best we're gonna get in this video. Mariah Carey was not done capitalizing off of her singular song, so she decided a movie needed to be made as well, and that's how we got this. This movie looks and feels like a lot of other low-budget kid shows, filled with ugly and lifeless 3D models and every other cliche you'd expect for a kid's Christmas special. The plot focuses on a young Mariah Carey really wanting a dog, eventually going to a dog shelter and wanting a dog named Princess. But to prove that she can take care of a dog, her dad makes up a BS story about her uncle needing someone to watch his dog, so Mariah Carey is forced to watch this new dog named Jack, to prove that she can take care of the dog that she actually wants. Most of the movie from this point essentially just involves the dog doing something that inconveniences Mariah Carey, and then Mariah Carey gets mad, upset, or embarrassed, repeat until a cheesy ending where Jack runs away and then she decides she doesn't want Princess, but instead wants Jack back. So her Money Machine song starts playing because all she wants for Christmas is Jack. And so with the power of a montage, the town teams up to find Jack, and happily ever after. I can't say this is like one of the worst films to exist or anything, but it is definitely a bit boring. The plot exists, but it's just kind of the same events with minor alterations over and over again until we get to the end. The music is actually pretty decent, even if it is just kind of Mariah Carey randomly chiming in with a song during a montage, and I think the kids will probably enjoy this one. It has dogs, that's usually enough for them. On the other hand though, I think you would have a hard time finding an adult who would actively like this movie. Because kids would probably like it, and because the story wasn't terrible, I'm gonna give this a 2.5 stars, but I'm definitely not the right audience for this one.
I'm telling you why. Santa Claus is coming.
Now this is what some might call cinema. Alright, okay, the plot is difficult to explain, but I'll give it a shot. So there's this kid named Ari who lives in a forest with some magic talking animals, mainly 2 dogs named Fox and Winter, who all learn about Christmas from this owl, and so because Ari wants to see his parents again, he talks to a magic tree to have him take him to New York so he can tell Santa he wants to see his parents for Christmas. While they're in New York, the trio work to find out the name of all of Santa's reindeer, because apparently Santa needs this information, and while they're going around the city, they randomly help people until they find a mailbox to put Ari's letter in, which he somehow gets that night of Christmas Eve and arrives to Ari and the dogs as they sit outside, bringing Ari's parents, but it was apparently a dream, and then it's not, and Merry Christmas. When I was talking about bad Christmas movies, this is what I needed. This shit is horrible. The animation is actually kind of okay for a kid's movie, but the story is absolutely nonsensical, definitely seeming to come from somebody who doesn't really understand Christmas, and this makes a lot of sense when you realize that it's actually an Italian movie that was apparently animated with the help of a North Korean studio? An unlikely combo. The dialogue feels AI generated and is sometimes even repeated. The voice acting is some of the worst shit I've ever heard, and it is all amazing. There's so much random shit that happens in this movie that I thoroughly enjoyed. Like, one thing I noticed is that for some reason the director had the voice actors bark most of the time, which is awful enough on its own, but they also just randomly put an actual dog bark in sometimes, almost back to back with the voice actors' barks. It's phenomenal. When I think of a so bad it's good Christmas movie, this is kind of what I was looking for. It's an eldritch abomination of a film, and personally, I really like it. So I'm gonna give this one 4 stars. great word to describe this movie is boring. Very, very boring. The plot essentially revolves around this orphanage run by this evil lady named Mrs. Mavilda, who lies about taking care of the kids to receive money from the mayor that she uses to gamble instead of providing for them. During our story, a new family moves in, and with the help of the mayor, the wife Judy and her 2 kids stay at the orphanage while the husband works, and in exchange for staying there, Judy helps Mavilda around the orphanage. While Judy's there, she realizes that Mrs. Mavilda is actually like a giant piece of shit, and that the kids all randomly love this one tree they call Mrs. Hopewell for some reason. They try to like insert this sort of plot about how like the tree is like a metaphor of the kids trying to like reach out for care and attention. It doesn't really make sense. Doesn't really work. Before Christmas, the mayor brings Mavilda extra money to buy the kids new clothes and gifts for Christmas, which she obviously decides to gamble away, leading to a series of events in which Mavilda tries to frame Judy for stealing, Judy's daughter getting lost trying to warn her mom about the framing, and Mavilda almost cutting down the tree in the backyard before she gets struck by fucking lightning as Santa returns Judy's lost daughter to her, as Mavilda is also caught by the mayor. There's really nothing positive going on in this movie other than the fact that it's like 40 minutes long. The characters are cliche and forgettable, the plot is uninteresting, the voice acting is bland, the animation and visuals are just gross, the editing is weird. The movie is just not worth watching. It's a waste of time. A half a star.
is a thing to say.
Now, I'm not the biggest fan of the original Christmas Vacation movie or anything, but like, wow, that was not very good. 14 years after the release of the first one, this movie comes along as an obvious soulless cash grab to squeeze what goodwill was left of the first movie. This time focusing on Uncle Eddie from the first movie, whose only real trait is that he's really, really fucking stupid. Kind of feels like when SpongeBob did the offshoot show with Patrick as the main character, which was essentially just a worse version of SpongeBob. After being fired from a nuclear waste job in which he gets injected with nuclear waste, Eddie ends up being bit by his research monkey coworker, and to avoid a legal battle, the company they work for sent him and his family on a tropical vacation where we see some familiar faces from the first movie make a return because, money. On the vacation, Uncle Eddie does some stupid stuff, and then wacky stuff happens, eventually leading to them being stranded on a deserted island, forcing them to spend Christmas stranded in the middle of the ocean. But don't worry, Uncle Eddie is able to prove himself as not a dumbass by smashing things together and killing a wild boar, which for some reason earns the respect of his family before they are eventually saved by a pilot who Uncle Eddie manages to give brain damage, leading to the pilot passing out on the flight back, but despite his sub-zero IQ, Uncle Eddie is able to land the plane and save the day. Wow, I don't think I've ever seen better writing than this. I'm truly impressed with how almost no joke manages to land, despite the movie so desperately attempting to be funny. There are a few heartfelt moments that this movie also tries to pull off, which are just so rushed. The characters' dialogue in these scenes makes no sense, as none of the resolved conflicts feel earned. There's one scene in particular in which the very attractive island tour lady says how thankful she is to the family for making her feel so loved and welcome on this Christmas, after essentially getting her stranded on the island and then having the grandpa of the family sexually harass her for like a few days. Nothing compelling happens in this movie, and I feel dumber for having watched it. I don't think it's the worst movie in the world or anything, but I also really struggle to find almost anything positive to say about it, and I feel like most people will as well. Don't watch this. 0 stars.
Santa baby,
This movie is actually amazing, a hidden gem, if you will. Our star of the show here is the Hulkster himself, playing a rich asshole movie star when he decides to have a random paintball fight while driving, getting into a chase with the police, which causes him to run into the mall and disguise himself in a Santa costume that's lying around before he heads down a garbage chute, banging his head on the way down, giving him amnesia. And with the help of a random mall worker who is in debt to a shadowy criminal organization, the Hulk Hogan gets convinced that he is instead Santa Claus. And so he assumes the role of Santa at a meet and greet that is happening at said mall. But during the event, he gets confronted by a group of thieving criminals who he swiftly takes care of before getting a sudden urge to head to the local orphanage after seeing a sign for it. And when he arrives, he ends up running into the gang the elf mall worker guy is in debt to, leading to Santa Hulk Hogan to also stopping this gang of crooks after they finish terrorizing the orphanage, in a scene where Santa Hulk Hogan stops a speeding car from hitting a man crossing the road by pulling on the car with a rope. And because the orphanage children are so grateful, they invite him to stay over for dinner, leading to a newfound desire to protect and take care of these children. And this is just like the setup for the movie. Maybe the first 30 minutes. It is so stupid. It is so incomprehensibly devoid of logic. Its acting is generally bad, which isn't helped at all by the extremely cheesy dialogue, which almost feels like a deliberate parody of old superhero shows. And it's honestly pretty funny, I'd say. It is absolute slop, and I think most people will love it. I'm not going to spoil too many things for that reason. I gave you the overview, and I really encourage you to watch this one on your own. If you look out there, it's really not too hard to find. Big fan. I'm going to give this 5 stars. And I suppose that brings us to the end of the list. So, out of all of these, what do I think is the worst Christmas movie of all time? And honestly, that's easily going to Kirk Cameron. I'm sorry, man. No idea if you're like a chill guy or not, but this is hardly a movie. There's almost nothing enjoyable about this thing. And although I really didn't like it, I actually kind of hated it. It's just so offensively boring that I'm confident I will not remember this after I'm finally done with this video. Do not watch it. And there you have it. That is every bad Christmas movie that exists. There are no others at all. Honestly though, I wanted to do more, but as the end of my monthly deadline approached, I realized that I was kind of cutting things a bit too close and had to make a call to stop at some point. There's quite a few more I plan on watching. Some include The Santa Claus 3, An American Carol, Jack Frost from 1997, Silent Night, Deadly Night 1 and 2, Grandma Got Run Over by a Reindeer, the Star Wars Holiday Special, which I eventually cut because I ruled that it wasn't necessarily a Christmas movie, it's a holiday special. So maybe I'm not done with this yearly humiliation ritual of reviewing bad Christmas movies, who knows. If there's some movies I missed that you think I should have had on here, let me know. They might just make it into next year's list if I decide to do this again. Thank you all so much for watching, and of course a special thanks to this month's patrons. Alright, sorry guys, I'm a bit sick right now, so my voice sounds a little bit different, but our patrons of the month are Mads, Dave the Unknown, Griff, Einar Anderson, Turmeric, Maddie Grady, Zarl Dunking, Kenny, Daddy Yam, and Bup1. Although I do have a non-functioning fireplace in my apartment, what truly keeps me warm this holiday season is your love and affection. Sincerely though, thank you everyone for watching. It's been a pleasure being on YouTube for another year, and it's your support that's keeping me here. I hope you all have a very Merry Christmas, and until next year, take care.